So continuing with European politics, I had asked this question to Jorge from YWF in the previous interview, and I have the same question for all European federalists I'm coming across. It's being said that the union is in peril ever since Brexit and then the recent occurrences in Poland. So, what are your opinions on this?
I think that the difficulties in the European Union, I think, are not difficulties per se of the European Union. It's just of the political times that we live, right? Because again, Brexit, you cannot really understand it in through a political European Union perspective. I mean, Brexit has to be understood through processes that happen worldwide. You know, Brexit has to do with Trump. Brexit has to do with movements that might happen in that have been happening in Latin America long before that, for example. So if you just want to read what's going on in Europe through a European perspective, I think that you're missing out on what's going on outside the EU. And outside the EU, we have a world that is less prone to internationalization, to multilateralism in many senses. So is it a tough time for the European Union? Yes, it is a tough time for the European Union because it's a process right now that is being held at a time where the core ideas of the process are under threat. Does this mean that the European Union then it's on a steep decline and disappear? No, not at all. I think that the European Union is pretty much on a safe ground. The problems that it has are more for, which got better after COVID a little bit. I gotta say, I have to give it to the EU. They've been more aggressive in terms of looking of ways to promoting more of a federal Europe, and hopefully the new German government does so. And I think that there are leaders proponent of deepening the union. So I'm not a pessimist about what's going with the EU, and I think that, and I don't believe that the problems of the EU can be looked only through the lens of the EU, but in a lens of historical time that we live in. We're living to something that resembles more the 1930s than the 1950s. So it's logical that institutions that are the results of the Second World War are going to suffer for a time that's actually where people had to understood that this was going to lead us through a very dark time, right? I hope that this is not going to lead us to such a dark time. The last thing that dies is hope. So I think that we're not going through that direction, but we have to be honest, and since 2008, the world has gone through a process of more of a protectionist view worldwide. So it's normal that institutions that are not protectionist, that are looking towards outside the limits of countries, of nation states, are going to suffer.
And as world federalists, we can't actually afford to lose out on the European Union, because that's what is basically the beacon of hope that's keeping us all going. So let's hope that those dark times they don't come back, and we improve for the better.
For sure, I agree.
So coming back to UNPA, something which you had mentioned earlier in the interview, could you tell us a bit about your experience as the Latin America coordinator for them?
Yes, well, it was a really good experience. I enjoyed it pretty much. It was a good way to sort of, because it was the last sort of position I had when I was with Democracia Global, so I enjoyed it quite a bit, because it was when they allowed me and they proposed me to handle this, it was a great responsibility, and I was very honored when they did so. It was a good experience. It was challenging, but it was good. I had the opportunity to have discussions with people from all around Latin America to see where their positions were around this issue, to make good connections in countries like the Dominican Republic, in Brazil, and also to sort of lay out the foundations a little bit, because at that time when I was coordinating the campaign there, we started laying out the foundations for the UNPA models, right? That then we did the year I was before, it was in 2019 that we did in the Congress in Argentina, which was a very important event. I wasn't the person who, let's say, had the final touch on that, because at that point then I was leaving, but I sort of lay out the foundations for that, and I was very, very excited when it happened. So the experience overall was really, really good. And I mean, also the possibility to get in-depth knowledge about the UNPA campaign, because before that I was more focused on working with COPLA and working on campaigns more for the Latin American perspective. Having that, working on a campaign with a worldwide sort of network, really opened up a new possibility for me to get in contact with people outside of our organizations in Latin America, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. It's probably the thing I enjoy the most. I mean, for me, if I would say that I always take something with me from what I do with these organizations, is this type of thing, what we're doing. I mean, talking for me with people from all around the world, that's the most important thing, even most important to what we do. I enjoy feeling this cross-cultural exchanges. For me, they are key. So that UNPA and that my time doing that gave me that, and it's the thing that I take with me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most exciting part about like being a part of the movement. You get to talk to people across the world, across like varied political, not exactly political opinions is there, but across varied personal and professional backgrounds. People like you and all the other wonderful people I've interviewed until now. So that's really exciting. And
For
by the
sure, for sure,
way,
and I hope that it happens with much more, with more, like, we get closer as a community internationally. I hope we have that opportunity. It's been tough to do something because, again, travel is very expensive and things are very expensive to have these more personal relations. Hopefully in the future we can have them. This is really good, and I think that also with COVID, and one of the positive things with COVID is that it has led us to give more value to this kind of type of exchanges online, and I think that that's great. But I'm hopeful that in the future we can do it more in a personal sense, because I also believe that that's one of the key things, for example, that WEF does really well, and JEF in Europe does do really well, which is incentivizing people from different countries to meet, to exchange ideas in person, and also from there to gain, when you see people doing the same thing that you're doing, and struggling the same way that you're struggling, you get a little bit more of an incentive to keep doing, because you don't feel alone. Having a movement that's strong, that it's ample, and that puts people together, so it's going to be much tougher to beat than individuals scattered without really knowing other people outside of their close vicinity, let's say.
yes, like people feel they have an impact, and like their efforts are not going in vain. So that's when they feel like, and like that's a really great initiative by the young European Federalists and the European Federalists to incentivize people from across the countries to come together. And hopefully we can have something of that sort in the future for the World Federalist community as well. I personally am very optimistic in that regard, and I look forward to an opportunity to meet with all of you people in person.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. Hopefully we can do that. I'm excited about that.
So, I had a follow-up question for the UNPA thing. Have you been associated with the UNPA simulation?
Yes, yes. As I mentioned, when I was coordinating, we started doing like a proto model. Then, because I had other responsibilities in 2019, and I sort of started leaving behind my responsibility as UNPA coordinator, then that project stepped to other people. But I took part in the UNPA model in Argentina. I accompanied my team there with Democracia Global, so I was with them. So yeah, so we were really excited about it, and it was a really extremely very good experience to have, and hopefully something that I want to repeat here in Spain. We'll see what's going on. We were going to do it before COVID. We had a strong alliances with local institutions here in Spain and with universities in Spain. COVID happened, so everything that was not online had to be out of the table. But hopefully now that things are getting better, we can pick it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish you all the best for that. For the viewers who don't know about the UNPA simulation, this was started in 2019, I believe, as Tomás stated, and that was a really great event. They had it in the Legislative Assembly of Argentina, so a very big event, and they had a couple of committees where they discussed finance, they discussed environment, and they came out with bills that are still available, and I believe it's available for the perusal of the public on the internet. So a really great event. I believe the University of Belgrano, which is the alma mater of
Yeah.
Tomás. So
I did it with that, yeah. And the good thing about that event was, of course, everything about the procedure in terms of the really good content and the people participants developed. But what I enjoyed the most was that we had the opportunity to put youth at firstly in Congress, in the same chamber that all these our representatives represent us. Sorry for the pun there, but that opportunity for them to exchange with politicians, to be around that environment, I mean, that was key, because again, it gives it a lot of, let's say, prestige, and people start to, the politicians that saw the events and were with us, because it was also filmed, they were really impressed. They were really happy to be, exchanging ideas with youth, with the youth. And I think that's going to be the key moving forward, so I think that this project, the UNPA, with its adaptations, because locally we might need to change things to make it work in different countries, but I'm a big believer that we should keep it, because I think that a lot of things can be taken out of it.
So, like, basically inspired by the UNPA simulation, we had a similar event in India, of course, online, and wasn't as prestigious as the UNPA one, but we tried to have something over Zoom, and with the help of the Young World Federalists, and then with associated institutions, youth groups, we had school and college students from across the country and across Africa and Europe also join us. So we're looking forward to working on that in collaboration with Democracia Global and Democracy Without Borders in the future. So I'm really excited for the upcoming year.
For sure, I think that we can build on what you guys did in India. I think that it was an excellent experience. I actually had the opportunity to take part in one of the closing up meetings that they did after the event. So I was really excited for that whole process, and I'm really, really happy with the results. And hopefully you guys can keep on doing it there. Hopefully in person, that will be really, really good. And worldwide, the idea is to expand it, and hopefully from us, DWB in Spain, that would be a nice objective to do one as soon as possible here too.
So to all the viewers watching this, stay tuned to our YouTube channel, to the social media accounts of all these World Federalist organizations, so that you're updated about opportunities like these. These are great opportunities. You can add something to your CV, as well as take a lot of wonderful ideas with you along and make new friends.
For sure. That's the most important part.
So, okay, Thomas, your mother tongue isn't English, neither it isn't mine either. So, don't you think that English is a dominating language currently, and we should replace it with something like Esperanto or Globasa?
It's a very interesting proposition. I always found it that it's a thing that needs to be discussed. I have a sort of personal opinion in terms of language that has quite a lot been influenced by a lot of the things. I'm also living here in Spain, but because here is a country where the language issue is a big discussion topic, very big discussion topics, with the things about Catalan and on different languages in the north of Spain. So it's something very prominent. My core opinion in terms of language issues is that it's very difficult or not advised, in my sense, to really force changes within language. And when I think about Esperanto, the idea of a language being created to do that, to force a change in conversation, I like the idea, but I don't think it's going to be something successful, because I think that languages are a movable thing, are something that changes with time and they evolve. Even how I speak Spanish, it's evolving, and you see for the whole Spanish-speaking community how it evolved through time. It's very different how people in Spain speak Spanish than what I speak from my natal Argentina. Even now, with, for example, the process of the developments of English worldwide, we incorporated in the Spanish language lots of English words, English ideas to it. And even, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the States, and you see also that that's happening with Spanish speakers influencing a lot of what English speakers speak in the US, and they are actually going to be the biggest speaking community in the US. So there's a lot of changes, language changes that are going to happen that we do not know about. So I understand that it would be really, really good to have like a world language that it's detached from predominant language cultures, but I don't think that this is something that is realistic. I think that language needs to evolve, as language has always evolved through history. It needs to change, and it needs to adapt itself to the realities of history. You know, that's the core issue to me. Like imposed language, I don't see a viable future for something that it's imposed.
Mm-hmm. And since we are discussing languages, I'll take the liberty to ask a personal question. You have any tips for people who wish to learn Spanish for beginners and people who aren't very great at learning new languages?
Tips for Spanish. Look, I've always been. I had when I was in university. I was for a smaller time an English teacher in Argentina. So I don't have much experience the other way around. But I gotta say with Spanish, firstly that it's a very diverse language, so that shouldn't get you worried. You have to be aware that speaking Spanish is not like in a sense like speaking English. That's a little bit more standardized. You might have differences in between words in the UK and the US, or in Australia and the US. But with Spanish, it's a little bit of a whole other world because it's very much like, I think it might be more similar, for example, in a sense to Arabic or some other language where you understand the core in all countries, but there are just different similarities. And you have that in Spain too, right? Here, Spanish has developed so much that you have pretty much completely different languages. Like speaking Spanish in Galicia is not Spanish anymore. It's another language. So I think that if you are learning, I would give you the same tips that I would do to anyone learning a new language. Try to be less aware of what you're speaking and just go and move and try to speak and read as much as possible. And Spanish is not a very difficult language, honestly. It is not. It's easy. It's very much straightforward. There are other words that are very similar to other, let's say, at the end of the day, it's a Latin tongue. So if you have the opportunity to get involved into the community of Latin languages, even if you have the opportunity to learn even Anglo-Saxon, because there's European languages or languages that emerge from Europe, at the end of the day, have a lot of similarities. So I would say, that's the way to go.
Thanks a lot for the tip. I'll try to work on that and hopefully I'm able to successfully learn Spanish.
That would be good. I should learn your language though.
So coming back to the serious discussion again, as a student of international relations and currently you're pursuing public affairs, under what circumstances do you think the countries of the world will join together to form a federation?
That's a really, really good question. Difficult one, but really good. I think that the path moving forward, it's going to happen mostly through the technological innovation. That's the way I see it. I think that technology is going to force us to a state where if we do not execute certain political structural changes, that the threat of that development getting out of our hands is going to be too great. And I think that's the point where governments, I believe, and these political institutions, which are typical, and it's very logical that they are very conservative. Political institutions are the most conservative things there are. I mean, by definition, a political institution needs to be conservative because what they do is preserve the status quo of a political system. So it's not, if we are expecting magically the US, India, and China to change whole outlook from day to morning, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that the force of evolution of technology and the needs of citizens are going to dictate that. It's a lot of counterfactual what I'm saying, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we do not know how that change is going to be. We hope for and we take action towards that change, but we're not sure. The actions I recommend are the ones that I think that are the best way for us to transition to that in a let's say, in a peaceful way, and in a way that we have sort of control over that change. Because one of the fears also of, and this is something that was discussed quite a lot in the beginning of federalism, is what is the nightmare scenario? Where the nightmare scenario, for me, it's a case where federalism is it's not understood, but central government appears, right? And if we get to that point, which seems a lot like it would be very similar to what we want, which is a world government, but who are going to put the conditions on that? And how are we going to develop the conditions on that? So that's the key here, and that's why I'm a federalist, because I believe that the end point, it's going to be, the possibility of having something of a world political structure is very much possible. And but the problem is in which terms. And that's the reason why I'm a federalist, and that's the reason why I'm doing what I do, is I want people to be aware that we need to be in control of the steps we take towards that direction. I'm not sure of how that's going to happen. There are people far more intelligent than myself analyzing this, so my opinions at the end of the day are not that valid. So I'm just doing my little work there to try to make these transitions as peaceful and as democratic as possible.
Contributing our part to whatever we consider to be virtuous and what we consider to be important for the world. And then in pursuit of utopia, we often end up with something better. And most of the things, let's consider democracy, let's consider universal credit franchisee. All of these things, they were considered utopia at once, but now we have them and we're still working on them. So this is synonymous to that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And also, I love the word that you bring, the issue of utopia, because it's there's a, at the end of the day, there's a philosophical question there, which is, and I also would like to put there, for example, as definitions in terms of good government, and for example, the generation that the Greeks spoke of, the idea of oligarchy versus aristocracy, the good and the bad, right? The good government and the bad government, and all of these questions are utopia. Also, for political changes, there always needs to be hardship. There's no political change without hardship. It's not realistic, not at all. So we need to be aware that that's going to happen at some point. Through hardship is when change comes. The French Revolution did not happen in a bed of roses. The United States Revolution didn't happen that way. Latin American revolutions didn't happen that way. Even the Soviet Union didn't happen that way. No, there's no possibility of not some sort of hardship for change. But what we have to strive for is through managing that hardship and managing the expectations and constructing and building up what we believe the future holds, to not let it be managed by people outside of the normal citizens, right? Because we run a big risk, and I think that this is the biggest risk, is we're losing control of our future. It's not just a question of nation states, it's a question of big corporations, it's a question of a lot of political and economic structures that are not democratic, and they are guiding towards our future. And political participation is not the key there. So what we need to strive for is a lot of political participation, and in the areas where political participation is needed. I'm not asking for socialization of global companies, not at all. I don't believe in that. But if we put institutions that create rule of laws internationally, we are going to be the ones managing how the decisions are being taken there. So again, it's my perspective. It's a question of how do we get there, and how do we manage to make it as democratic as possible for all of us.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, coming to revolution and hardships, I believe you must have heard about Gary Davis. And what do you think about his campaign and the World Citizen Authority? Now they have rechristened themselves as the World Citizen Government. So what is your opinion on their struggle?
Well, about Gary Davis, I think that I have a very, let's say, a positive view on that. I think that we hopefully we can have that sort of image in the future, of something similar. I like Gary Davis in the sense that we live in a very visual world. We live in a world where, when you have certain presence and certain leadership, that a lot of things can be taken and develop into the public eye. So I would have loved, for example, to see Gary Davis at that time doing things today, because with social media it would be something completely different that I think that we wouldn't imagine. Imagining Gary Davis in 2022, it would be crazy. So I support that, and I support those core values. I support the idea. Um, you know, I don't have much to add about it, despite my full support on that. And the idea that yes, I want to live. I want to make it clear that I think that we sort of need that leadership once again, and that non-politician sort of influencing presence. Because at the end of the day, Gary Davis wasn't really a politician; did not have active political power. That would be really, really good. And I had actually discussions with people I collaborate. The idea of how can we penetrate, our discourse can penetrate into people who provide to have media influence, in a sense, not in traditional media, but I don't know, for example, right now, platforms like Twitch, and people there have 20 million views on a single day sometimes. Imagine having somebody from those spectrums of public opinion saying something like what Gary Davis said. That would be something, a major change, public opinion change, and something that would boost us quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
And deep within each one of us world federalists, we would love to see someone going again and into the United Nations and disrupting a meeting where basically the nations are squabbling and interrupting that. And I protest in the name of the people not represented here. That's something I would love to see. And I personally wouldn't mind going ahead and doing that, but then.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit tough nowadays. I mean, the security, I can imagine that it was very different at that time than right now.
And ironically, the United Nations has sort of worked on its security, so that technically isn't possible right now.
Yeah, it is. It is. Sadly, it is. But yeah, but that's sort of, I think that we need that. We need a little bit of, well, there's a lot of things we need. That's the honest truth. We need a lot of things. We need to become more 21st century minded. We need to be more aware that trends of politics have become even, and this is things that I'm not saying that they are good. I'm just saying that it's a reality. Less intellectual, for sure, more activist, and more social media marketing activist, and do that. That's also one of the things why I started, I'm doing my lobby and studying lobby in my master's, is that I think that I'm getting a lot of keys of understanding how the modern world of activism and social media is happening. I had a case, for example, not long ago that I found very, very interesting. I'm just going to tell you very shortly. I did not know, but Greenpeace did a campaign where they made a video with basically using Legos and using the song. I think that the song from the movie Lego was called "Everything Is Okay" or "Everything Is Great," or something like that. I can't remember. I'm sorry, I did not watch the movie, but they did a twist on that, turning that song into "Everything's like it's not okay, it's bad," and the Lego pieces, they start being sort of submerged into oil. And the point of that ad was that Lego had a collaboration with, I think it was BP, or one of the big petroleum companies. And what they try to achieve is to force Lego, through showing that they had this collaboration with a very polluting company, and a company, Lego, that is supposed to be built on certain principles, to force them to break up their relationship with them because of the negative press that this was generating around the product. And my analysis of, first of all, they managed with that campaign, they managed to break this relationship. They managed that, which was their objective there. Its objective was not to attack Lego, was to attack the polluting oil company. So they managed to cut that tie, which is very smart. And the second point is that they did not manage this with academic papers. They managed this with hiring a marketing team, having them do analyzing a marketing campaign, putting that on TV or on social media and making people see it. So that, I think, is where hopefully we can go, right? Being more pragmatic, being more aware of the needs for political messages in the 21st century. Somebody on TikTok is going to have much more impact than if we write a paper of 200 pages and we send it to the UN, because we are doing that. And is that working? Yes and no, but we haven't tried yet the TikTok thing. So that would be really, really good.
But I would love to check that Lego ad, and that sounds lovely. I have neither watched the movie and I know nothing about Lego as such, but then I'll surely check that out. And maybe we could attach the link of that in the description of this video so that people could have a look at it. And I personally would look forward to a lot of such advertisements come up. So like the Young World Federalist, they had a very cute little advertisement. It's basically, they talk about a girl called Nina, and through a bit of animation, not really very great, but like a basic animation, explaining how the idea of federalism works. So when Nina has a problem, she goes to the police station, and the police inspector is appointed by the local government. So she votes for the local government. But when she has a global problem, like let's say climate change or something, she has no one to go to. So be like Nina, support world federalism, and you'll get a thing to go to. You'll get an institution to visit whenever you have a global problem. So
that's really good. Yeah, I saw those animations. They're really good. Yeah, and that's the base where we need to build. And I definitely agree with that strategy. And hopefully, once we start developing that strategy more, getting more people involved, having people with public influence and replicating those kind of actions, that would be ideal. I mean, it's a little bit of a dream of mine that I discussed with a couple of people who I collaborate here. Doina Strato, for example, that she's the president of JEF Spain, and those are the kind of crazy things that we think about. We're not 100% sure how to have them done, but we try and we figure it out, and we even contacted a couple of people on Twitch that have quite a big reception. You know, we don't need to be afraid of trying things out. They like 80-90% of them won't work, but if we don't try, we just don't know, right? So again, coming back to what I would recommend, and everyone who's watching this, is like, don't be afraid of failure, dream big, and try to do whatever you can do. And even if it sounds crazy, give it a try. Give it a try. You don't know what's going to happen.
So coming to that, what are your plans for Democracy Without Borders Spain, and where do you see your organization as a whole in the upcoming years? By whole, I mean not just Spain, but like Democracy Without Borders across the world.
Well, in starting from the small to the big, in terms of Democracy Without Borders Spain, we are really excited that we are finishing up like the whole legal institution of it in Spain, which is going to grant us a lot of opportunities, both in terms of looking for finance, in talking as equals with institutions that are legally created, which was something that for us, it was very important. And the process, let's say from this year onwards, for me, is to look firstly to add people to the team, to construct small teams here in Spain of people that can give a little bit of their time to working on it, have a good project done this year, something big, and deepening, which is the part of lobby, deepening our relations with MPs, with political, people within political parties and institutions in Spain. That would be like the short term, let's say 1 year, 2 year plan, which is like making it solid, making a structure that can go through time, right? Because it's not easy. Actually, it's one of the toughest things when you build a new structure is how do you maintain it through time? Because, okay, at some point, the people right now are going to leave this organization, right? That's the hope. The hope is that, we don't have the same people through time doing this and not adding people. So that's my goal. And in terms of general for Democracy Without Borders, I mean, one of the things that I would enjoy quite a bit is firstly and I think that this is the project, and I think that Andreas Uma would share this with me, and we were discussing on strategy, they were developing a strategy document, which was really good, is the expansion on chapters, especially on countries where we do not have, again, any federalist representation. So giving that idea of a more diverse movement, right? We are doing quite good. One of the things that I like about Democracy Without Borders is that it's pretty much quite expanded on the global south, maybe some exceptions, for example, Latin America, but in general, it's quite expanded. So I think that developing that would be really, really good. And from there, that like the next step would be to give it a more of a structure for new chapters, sort of like a way on how to really launch their processes in the different countries. So that would be my objectives within Democracy Without Borders International. Of course, I'm focusing on myself. The organization, of course, has many different things that they can talk about, but I want to give you my perspective on it.
My best wishes for you in this journey, and I hope that Democracy Without Border does great in Spain and both internationally.
Thank you.
That this might be slightly controversial again. Like, it's completely upon you. What are your opinions on the constitutional monarchy in Spain?
Well, that is a topic that for me, I don't have much of a problem, maybe because I'm an outsider and I'm not originally from Spain, but here it's a big discussion. My opinion on the monarchy has to do, has like one side, which is the political idea of still having monarchies, and one side that it's the current political situation in Spain, because I think that it has two readings. If you ask me about monarchies in general, I'm like not super against, because for me, the key issue here is democracy, and you can have democratic states with monarchies, but I would rather not have monarchies. Does this mean that I'm going to be they call tomorrow in Spain a march against the monarchy? I'm going to be there? Probably not. Probably not. And in Spain, probably even more not. And sorry for my really bad English there, but why? Because in many countries, and Spain is one of them, to have a change in the monarchy, you need to have a constitutional change. You need to change the constitution. And this is not really a great time in Spain to change the constitution for two reasons. One is because Spain, after the dictatorship of Franco and the constitution that it came out of that dictatorship, the new democratic Spain, this has been by far the greatest period in the history of Spain. This has been in this last 40-something years, Spain has become a country that was pretty much a very poor country, related almost to third world countries. People, my forefathers came from Spain to Argentina because they were dying of hunger here in Spain. They went into something more prosperous, and Spain grew to the point where before the crisis, they were one of the 10 biggest economies with political stability, economic stability. It really became the country that it is today, which is a really great country. Spain is an amazing country with a lot of political liberties, and democracy has a really good institutional level in Spain. So the problem is here that right now there are parties in Spain, I'm thinking about far right and far left parties, that if we open the discussion about a constitutional reform, they are going to make the process very difficult. And also, they are going to take that opportunity to destroy a lot of the core principles of the growth that Spain's been having. So they're not going to just focus on getting rid of the monarchy. They're going to take that opportunity to break up the system. And there are even parties here that they say that they want to finish with the constitution that came after that dictatorship. So that's why in Spain today, so 2022, I wouldn't support that. Should the situation change and we don't have a far right and far left party as prominent as we have right now, I would consider it, because in principle, I do not like monarchies.
Well, after learning that from you, I personally won't be also very supportive of a change right now, especially when circumstances are so polarized. Then that's fascinating to know that Spain is doing great as a democracy despite being a constitutional monarchy. And I sometimes am fascinated by this thing, like a lot of constitutional monarchies, like let's say Canada, let's say The UK, Spain, they have great democracies, while countries that call themselves democratic republics, like North Korea, undoubtedly, and a couple of more banana republics, they aren't exactly democratic. So maybe the term democracy isn't really, like, on the face of it, isn't really being followed by a lot of countries, and it's better to be a democracy in practice than being one on paper.
For sure, for sure, and I think that the case here is that I'm not going to make I'm not going to defend monarchies, but I'm just going to say something which, in terms of some specific monarchies in the world, is that some specific monarchies, and I would put here the UK one and the Spanish one, have based their legitimacy on democratic measures. So what does this mean? The democracy in UK, the monarchy in UK has been a democratizing factor through history. UK has gained democratic liberties far earlier than many other countries in the world, because the monarchy had always had this relation with nobles and states. If you study the history of the UK, where they had, they started giving democratic freedoms before, and that fomented more requests of democratic freedoms, so that we live into the state here. In Spain, the process is similar in the sense that not before the dictatorship, the big dictatorship that they had with Franco, which was a nationalist dictatorship, but the monarchy, once the opportunity arose, the monarchy became the paragon of defending the new democratic change. So for me, when I think about Spain and monarchy, I think of that political change towards democracy, living in an authoritarian state towards a democratic state. And the king of Spain, the one before the one that we have now, has been a factor for that. So that's why I think that at least this monarchy, and I don't know democracies in monarchies in Sweden, I know nothing about monarchies, but this one in Spain, I think that had a very important factor in the state of why we are here as Spanish people. Like the good 40 years that we had, the monarchy has been a part of it, with their difficulties. Some of them were cases of corruption, with all that you want. And again, monarchies are not what I want, so there's a lot of things to criticize. But in this particular case, it's a little bit tougher for me to criticize than with other monarchies.
That's interesting to know. I would like to know more about this. Maybe I'll read up more about this on the internet.
It's very interesting. So yeah, of course, I can send you some stuff so that you can read up too.
Thanks a lot for that. Lastly, a question on your professional life. You studied international relations in Argentina, and you're currently pursuing public affairs and lobby in Spain, as earlier discussed. So what difficulties did you encounter while studying across continents? Did you encounter any difficulties with the syllabus, maybe modes of learning, and like maybe, I don't know about the Spanish in Argentina and the Spanish in Spain, how different are they? So how was the experience as a whole?
Yeah,
Rather, because you're still studying.
Yeah, I'm still studying. Yeah, yes. So I think that the key main difference for me was in terms of going from a degree in Argentina towards finding something in Europe equivalent to a master's that would really add to my experience. Why? Because in Europe, due to the European harmonization, Bologna plan, and everything, they started cutting down on degrees. In Argentina, I come from a country in Argentina where usually degrees take 5 years or 4. And in Europe, they've been going from 4 to 3 and making the master's degrees a little bit more accessible to young people, especially who do not have work experience yet, and almost making it a part of the let's say of the curriculum post degree, but something that in my experience was already topics that I already covered in Argentina, that because of my degree there, that it had a lot of more time and also more focus on specific issues that were a little bit more in depth. It was going to be a little bit tougher. So it took me a little bit of a long time to find like the master's degree, or find masters, because there are many, of course, but I had to be very careful of where I wanted to study. So In the place I am now, what I do enjoy quite a bit is that it's a master's degree, that it has a lot of professional focus. So I'm exchanging every day with people that have already experience. Even some of them are politicians in Spain. So people that are, in a sense, not people that just came out of the university, and they have a professional experience. So that was very important for me. And that also adds to the fact that the contents that you see have a lot of a practical focus, right? So that was very important. It wasn't a big difference. It was just a difference of really looking towards what I wanted to develop myself, and looking at the place where I was going to do that had the conditions to do so. But once I did that, it's not very difficult, because at the end of the day, universities in Europe are very similar to the ones in Argentina in terms of the relationship professor-student, in terms of how they develop content. Latin America in general, but Argentina is a country that at the end of the day, culturally speaking, it's very close to Europe. So there wasn't really like a big culture exchange for me in that sense.
That's quite reassuring to know. Well,
really? Are you thinking about moving overseas to study, for example?
I wouldn't really, I would consider the idea. I'll pursue my graduation in India. That's something I've planned. And maybe post-graduation somewhere overseas. I was considering the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, US, or maybe somewhere else if I get interested in public policy. So currently I've kept my options open out there. Studying abroad, that gives you the cosmopolitan sort of life, which I've always wanted. Then meeting new people and having a new perspective of the world. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Let's see how things go.
Hopefully. I mean, today the good thing is that things are much easier to do so in terms of studying abroad. So there's a lot of, it's not like in a generation, for example, of my parents, where going to study abroad was a big deal. Today it's a little bit easier, and hopefully it becomes easier, because that cultural exchange is very, very important.
Like, we have a lot of Indians right now going to Germany and other places where technical education is comparatively cheaper. In fact, I was surprised to know that an engineering degree costs more in India in comparison to if you go and study in a public university in Germany. Not the private ones, but the public ones. It's difficult to get into them, but if you get into them, then like you have a really good prospects ahead. And of course, you have to learn German and accordingly adjust it. But then,
which is a difficult language, German, at least for me. It's not easy.
So the word,
but you'll manage to learn German for sure. You already look smarter than me, so I'm sure you're going to manage.
Let's see. I gave a try to a lot of languages. I tried a bit of Arabic. I haven't tried Spanish yet, but I'll surely give it a try after this interview for sure. A bit of Japanese. Japanese I sort of surrendered in the beginning itself. So that's the thing. But yeah, it was really great talking to you, Tomás, today, and really thank you for being a part of this interview, agreeing to this interview, and patiently addressing all my questions over the last 1.5 hours or two. I haven't kept a count of the time. So thank you very much, and I extend my best wishes to you in your pursuit for a global federation to strengthen the European Federation currently with Democracy Without Borders and with the young European Federalists and with your...
Look, also for me, it was a great pleasure. I was really excited when you contacted me for this. I'm really honored. And again, was a great opportunity for me to get in touch with you, and hopefully we can have these discussions. The people who've watched you and know that I'm always available, and I'm always up to discuss give a hand, discuss any issues, any topics, anything that will make us this network of Federalists around the world bloom. And I'm really hopeful that this kind of activities help in that direction.
With that, thanks to all the viewers who have watched the video until now, and I would highly request you to consider subscribing to the GFL YouTube channel to stay updated with further such interviews. I'll be interviewing Rita Kakatisha again from the Democracy Without Borders. She's the founding member of DWB India in the near future, and we have a couple of other interviews coming up. So stay tuned and have a nice day ahead, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.